There is a very thin line between a senile old man losing his mind and a seasoned predator waiting patiently in the shadows. Most people cannot tell the difference. They see a trembling hand, a stooped back, and a vacant stare, and they immediately assume the mind has rotted away. That assumption is the deadliest mistake a thief can ever make. Because sometimes the trembling is just a carefully orchestrated performance, and the vacant stare is actually calculating exactly how to burn your entire world to the ground. My name is Arthur Vance. For 35 years, I worked as a senior marine insurance fraud investigator. My days were spent tracking stolen cargo across international waters, hunting phantom fleets, and dismantling shell companies designed by men much smarter and more dangerous than the woman who eventually tried to destroy me. I lived my entire adult life in a world of microscopic financial discrepancies. I knew how to find a single missing dollar hidden within a million-page corporate ledger. I knew how to read the panic in a corrupt executive's eyes before he even opened his mouth to lie. I built my career on the absolute certainty that numbers, unlike human beings, are entirely incapable of deception. But life possesses a remarkably cruel sense of irony. The man who spent his prime recovering millions in stolen maritime assets was now living in a freezing, damp basement apartment on the forgotten outskirts of Boston. The Massachusetts winters are entirely unforgiving. The cold does not just touch your skin. It burrows deep into your aging bones and stays there until the late spring thaw. The rusted iron pipes running along my low ceiling groaned and hissed all night. They dripped a metallic-smelling condensation onto the warped concrete floor, creating icy puddles I had to carefully step around every morning. My daily sustenance consisted mostly of dented cans of discount lentil soup that I carried home from the neighborhood charity pantry. The soup always tasted faintly of tin and stale black pepper. I owned exactly 2 heavy wool sweaters, both heavily patched at the elbows, which I wore simultaneously indoors, just to keep my fingers from going entirely numb. I survived purely on the quiet mercy of strangers and the stubborn resilience I had cultivated over 7 decades of living. I did not end up in this miserable, water-stained box because of a gambling addiction, a foolish investment, or a sudden stroke of terrible luck. I ended up here because I did exactly what a loving father is supposed to do. When my beautiful wife, Margaret, passed away 12 years ago, the healthcare system devoured our life savings with ruthless efficiency. After she was gone, the heavy silence in our family home was absolutely deafening. Our only son, Julian, was brilliant, fiercely driven, and standing on the precipice of a major breakthrough in biotechnology. He needed a lifeline to bring his ideas into the real world. I did not hesitate for a single second. I sold the beautiful suburban house where Margaret and I had raised him. I liquidated the remaining scraps of my retirement fund. I gave Julian every penny I had, leaving myself with nothing but a suitcase of old clothes and a heart full of hope. You sacrifice your comfort to ensure your child can fly. That is the silent contract of parenthood. Julian took my sacrifice and built an absolute empire. By the time he turned 34, his biotech firm was generating staggering global revenue. He was a millionaire 10 times over, flying on private jets and wearing custom-tailored suits that cost more than my entire annual rent. He was constantly traveling, a blur of corporate summits and international expansion. Yet, despite his chaotic schedule, my son never forgot what I did for him. At least he truly believed he had not forgotten. Whenever Julian managed to call me between his endless board meetings, his voice was always filled with a genuine, heavy gratitude. "I have set up the irrevocable family trust, Dad. It is entirely secure." His voice cracked slightly over the cellular connection, heavy with the profound exhaustion of a man carrying a massive publicly traded company on his back. Chloe is personally handling the private wealth management side of things to ensure you never have to worry about a single medical bill or rent payment again. You are completely taken care of. I sat on the edge of my lumpy, sagging mattress, wrapping my thin wool blanket tighter around my shoulders to block the freezing winter draft bleeding through the cracked basement window. Thank you, Julian. Focus on your important work. I kept my tone perfectly even. I pressed my jaw tight so he wouldn't hear my teeth chattering over the line. I have everything I could possibly need right here. I believed him unconditionally. I truly believed that a substantial financial safety net existed, carefully and lovingly managed by his elegant new wife, Chloe. I had only met Chloe a few times, but she always presented herself as flawless. She wore pristine designer coats, and her presence was always announced by the overpowering scent of a painfully expensive Santal 33 perfume. I assumed the trust fund money was just sitting safely in a digital vault, reserved for emergencies or for the inevitable day my physical health completely failed me. I was a fiercely proud man. I refused to ask for a dime, finding a stubborn dignity in my poverty. I survived on the charity pantry and kept my mouth firmly shut, assuming they needed the liquid capital to continue growing their massive enterprise. But a veteran investigator's brain never truly powers down. It constantly observes, calculates, and measures the tiny, invisible discrepancies in the environment. And the discrepancies were beginning to pile up in the dark corners of my freezing room. It started with a crumpled pink Pawnshop receipt I found deep in the pocket of my overcoat, detailing the meager price of my old silver cufflinks. It was the only way I could afford emergency heating oil last January. I stared at that faded slip of paper under the buzzing yellow bulb of my basement, a cold realization creeping up my spine. A son who genuinely loved his father would never let him pawn his last cherished memories just to survive the winter. The massive wealth he promised was disappearing into thin air, and I was about to find out exactly who was playing a cruel game of God with my survival. There is a very thin line between a senile old man losing his mind and a seasoned predator waiting patiently in the shadows. Most people cannot tell the difference. They see a trembling hand, a stooped back, and a vacant stare, and they immediately assume the mind has rotted away. That assumption is the deadliest mistake a thief can ever make. Because sometimes the trembling is just a carefully orchestrated performance, and the vacant stare is actually calculating exactly how to burn your entire world to the ground. My name is Arthur Vance. For 35 years, I worked as a senior marine insurance fraud investigator. My days were spent tracking stolen cargo across international waters, hunting phantom fleets, and dismantling shell companies designed by men much smarter and more dangerous than the woman who eventually tried to destroy me. I lived my entire adult life in a world of microscopic financial discrepancies. I knew how to find a single missing dollar hidden within a million-page corporate ledger. I knew how to read the panic in a corrupt executive's eyes before he even opened his mouth to lie. I built my career on the absolute certainty that numbers, unlike human beings, are entirely incapable of deception. But life possesses a remarkably cruel sense of irony. The man who spent his prime recovering millions in stolen maritime assets was now living in a freezing, damp basement apartment on the forgotten outskirts of Boston. The Massachusetts winters are entirely unforgiving. The cold does not just touch your skin. It burrows deep into your aging bones and stays there until the late spring thaw. The rusted iron pipes running along my low ceiling groaned and hissed all night. They dripped a metallic-smelling condensation onto the warped concrete floor, creating icy puddles I had to carefully step around every morning. My daily sustenance consisted mostly of dented cans of discount lentil soup that I carried home from the neighborhood charity pantry. The soup always tasted faintly of tin and stale black pepper. I owned exactly 2 heavy wool sweaters, both heavily patched at the elbows, which I wore simultaneously indoors, just to keep my fingers from going entirely numb. I survived purely on the quiet mercy of strangers and the stubborn resilience I had cultivated over 7 decades of living. I did not end up in this miserable, water-stained box because of a gambling addiction, a foolish investment, or a sudden stroke of terrible luck. I ended up here because I did exactly what a loving father is supposed to do. When my beautiful wife, Margaret, passed away 12 years ago, the healthcare system devoured our life savings with ruthless efficiency. After she was gone, the heavy silence in our family home was absolutely deafening. Our only son, Julian, was brilliant, fiercely driven, and standing on the precipice of a major breakthrough in biotechnology. He needed a lifeline to bring his ideas into the real world. I did not hesitate for a single second. I sold the beautiful suburban house where Margaret and I had raised him. I liquidated the remaining scraps of my retirement fund. I gave Julian every penny I had, leaving myself with nothing but a suitcase of old clothes and a heart full of hope. You sacrifice your comfort to ensure your child can fly. That is the silent contract of parenthood. Julian took my sacrifice and built an absolute empire. By the time he turned 34, his biotech firm was generating staggering global revenue. He was a millionaire 10 times over, flying on private jets and wearing custom-tailored suits that cost more than my entire annual rent. He was constantly traveling, a blur of corporate summits and international expansion. Yet, despite his chaotic schedule, my son never forgot what I did for him. At least he truly believed he had not forgotten. Whenever Julian managed to call me between his endless board meetings, his voice was always filled with a genuine, heavy gratitude. "I have set up the irrevocable family trust, Dad. It is entirely secure." His voice cracked slightly over the cellular connection, heavy with the profound exhaustion of a man carrying a massive publicly traded company on his back. "Chloe is personally handling the private wealth management side of things to ensure you never have to worry about a single medical bill or rent payment again. You are completely taken care of." I sat on the edge of my lumpy, sagging mattress, wrapping my thin wool blanket tighter around my shoulders to block the freezing winter draft bleeding through the cracked basement window. "Thank you, Julian. Focus on your important work." I kept my tone perfectly even. I pressed my jaw tight so he wouldn't hear my teeth chattering over the line. "I have everything I could possibly need right here." I believed him unconditionally. I truly believed that a substantial financial safety net existed, carefully and lovingly managed by his elegant new wife, Chloe. I had only met Chloe a few times, but she always presented herself as flawless. She wore pristine designer coats, and her presence was always announced by the overpowering scent of a painfully expensive Santal 33 perfume. I assumed the trust fund money was just sitting safely in a digital vault, reserved for emergencies or for the inevitable day my physical health completely failed me. I was a fiercely proud man. I refused to ask for a dime, finding a stubborn dignity in my poverty. I survived on the charity pantry and kept my mouth firmly shut, assuming they needed the liquid capital to continue growing their massive enterprise. But a veteran investigator's brain never truly powers down. It constantly observes, calculates, and measures the tiny, invisible discrepancies in the environment. and the discrepancies were beginning to pile up in the dark corners of my freezing room. It started with a crumpled pink pawnshop receipt I found deep in the pocket of my overcoat, detailing the meager price of my old silver cufflinks. It was the only way I could afford emergency heating oil last January. I stared at that faded slip of paper under the buzzing yellow bulb of my basement, a cold realization creeping up my spine. A son who genuinely loved his father would never let him pawn his last cherished memories just to survive the winter. The massive wealth he promised was disappearing into thin air, and I was about to find out exactly who was playing a cruel game of God with my survival. The memory of that crumpled pawnshop receipt lingered in my mind long after I threw it away, poisoning the quiet nostalgia I clung to for warmth. It forced me to look back at the beautiful life I had carefully built with Margaret, and the son we had poured our souls into creating. I remembered Julian as a quiet boy with perpetually skinned knees and a heavy brass microscope. Margaret and I spent countless evenings sitting at our scratched oak dining table. That heavy wooden table was the center of our universe, where we paid our bills and mapped out our modest future. We built a home filled with the rich smell of cinnamon rolls on Sunday mornings and the steady hum of an old refrigerator. But when Margaret's aggressive illness arrived, that gentle hum was violently replaced by the terrifying rhythmic beeping of clinical hospital monitors and the sharp, sterile scent of bleach. After her funeral, I sat alone at that same oak table, slowly tracing the deep, familiar scratches in the wood with my thumb. Julian was 22, brilliant, but drowning in the sudden grief of losing his mother and the crushing financial reality of his ambitious biotech research. I pushed the deed to our beloved house across the polished wood. I didn't cry. I didn't give a long speech. I just told him to take it, to build the future his mother always knew he could achieve. That table, that house, my entire comfortable existence, it all became the silent foundation of his eventual empire. He succeeded beyond our wildest expectations. But immense wealth inevitably attracts predators disguised in beautiful, expensive clothing. Julian introduced me to Chloe during a rare, rushed lunch at a high-end downtown Boston bistro 2 years ago. She walked into the crowded restaurant, looking like a carefully curated magazine editorial. Her tailored cashmere coat was the color of pristine winter snow, and the heavy, intoxicating aroma of her Santal 33 perfume instantly masked the mouth-watering smell of roasted garlic and red wine in the room. She sat across from me, her perfectly manicured nails resting lightly on the crisp white tablecloth. "Julian tells me you were a fraud investigator, Arthur." She smiled, but the warmth never quite reached her cold, pale blue eyes. "It must be so difficult for you now, living in that cramped little basement. The isolation can really take a severe toll on a deteriorating mind." "I enjoy the quiet." I took a slow sip of my ice water, feeling the cold condensation on the glass while I watched her carefully measure me. "My mind is perfectly fine, Chloe." She possessed a terrifyingly elegant way of planting toxic seeds of doubt. Over the next 2 years, Julian's visits became agonizingly rare, replaced entirely by Chloe's occasional unannounced drop-ins at my basement. She never brought comfort or a hot meal. She brought subtly veiled insults disguised as deep familial concern. She would stand in the middle of my freezing room, looking at my meticulously organized stack of library books, and click her tongue in theatrical pity. "You forgot to call Julian on his birthday, Arthur," she whispered during one particularly freezing Tuesday afternoon, tightening her designer silk scarf around her neck, as if the very air in my home physically disgusted her. I stared at her, feeling a sharp, uncomfortable twist of confusion in my gut. I spoke to him at 8 in the morning. We talked for 20 minutes about his new biotech product launch. Chloe sighed deeply, placing a condescending, icy hand over my wrist. "Oh, Arthur, that was last year. I know the days just blur together for you now in this dark place. The specialist warned us this cognitive decline would happen rapidly." I spent 3 agonizing days analyzing that brief conversation. I checked the cheap digital clock on my microwave. I traced the bold red dates on the free paper calendar the local pharmacy had given me. I had called my son. I knew I had. But when a beautiful, wealthy woman looks you directly in the eyes and tells you with absolute tragic conviction that your reality is fracturing, a terrifying seed of self-doubt takes root. I was 73 years old. Was the crushing isolation finally breaking my cognitive faculties? Was I truly losing my grip on the present? I desperately wanted to believe I was just overthinking, that my paranoid investigator instincts were simply misfiring out of sheer loneliness. But then, the raw numbers began to whisper their undeniable truths. Julian had explicitly explained the mechanics of the family trust to me. He was depositing exactly $9,000 on the first day of every single month into a dedicated account at a private Boston bank. That money was specifically supposed to cover luxury assisted living, premium groceries, and top-tier medical care. Yet, I was sleeping in 2 heavy sweaters, washing my socks in a plastic bucket, and rationing dented cans of discount lentil soup. I called Julian late one evening, my fingers stiff and aching from the cold as I gripped the cheap plastic receiver of my prepaid mobile phone. "Julian," I started carefully, hearing the chaotic, overlapping boarding announcements of a busy international airport echoing in his background. "Are you absolutely certain the trust is fully active? I don't want to pry into your finances, but I haven't seen any paperwork." "Dad, please don't worry about the administrative details." He sounded breathless, heavily stressed, and entirely out of reach. "Chloe handles the transfers personally every single month. She showed me the official ledgers just yesterday. The $9,000 clears perfectly. I have to board this flight, Dad. I love you." The line went dead with a sharp click before I could speak another word. $9,000 a month. $108,000 a year. That kind of capital could have completely transformed my brutal, freezing existence. It could have bought me a sunlit apartment overlooking the harbor, fresh meat, and a reliable thermostat. Instead, it was vanishing into an absolute void. My son was telling the truth about sending the money, which meant only one other person had the authority to intercept it. A profound, creeping dread finally eclipsed the warm nostalgia of my past. I looked at the dark, damp, concrete walls of my freezing basement and realized I wasn't just a forgotten old man slowly losing his memory. I was the silent victim of a highly calculated, massive financial hemorrhage. And the predator had the key to my son's entire life. The dread that took root in my freezing basement did not paralyze me. It awakened a dormant, cold instinct I had buried a decade ago. I was no longer a confused father second-guessing his own decaying mind, but a veteran investigator staring at a freshly opened crime scene. I needed the raw, unassailable data, the kind of absolute proof that could not be gaslighted away by a beautiful woman wearing expensive perfume. The next morning, I pulled my old charcoal wool suit from the back of the damp closet. It still smelled faintly of dry cedar and mothballs from years of careful storage. I put it on, feeling the heavy, familiar fabric armor my frail shoulders. I walked through the biting Boston wind, ignoring the sharp, protesting ache in my arthritic knees, and pushed through the heavy brass doors of Commonwealth Private Bank. The sudden rush of warm, climate-controlled air and the subtle, intoxicating scent of polished mahogany and rich leather immediately grounded me. This was my old hunting ground. I bypassed the long line of regular customers and walked directly toward the glass-walled offices in the back. I was looking for Marcus. He was a senior wealth manager now, but 15 years ago, he was just an ambitious junior analyst whom I had quietly helped out of a severe regulatory compliance bind. He owed me his career, and in the high-stakes world of private finance, debts of competence are paid in absolute silence. "Arthur." Marcus stood up immediately as I walked into his office, hastily smoothing his expensive silk tie. He did not look at my worn shoes or my patched overcoat. He looked directly into my eyes with profound respect. "It has been a very long time. Please sit down." "I need a trace, Marcus." I placed my hands flat on the cool, polished glass of his desk, forcing my trembling fingers to remain perfectly still. A quiet, deep trace on the Julian Vance irrevocable family trust. No alerts, no automated alarms. Marcus did not ask a single unnecessary question. The mechanical click of his heavy keyboard sounded like a ticking metronome in the hushed, soundproofed office. He turned his massive flat-screen monitor toward me, the harsh blue glare illuminating the deep, tired lines carved into his face. The system populated the main ledger, and the first column of data I saw brought a sudden, overwhelming wave of emotion. $9,000. Deposited on the first day of every single month, as regular and dependable as a heartbeat. Julian was keeping his word. A brief wave of profound relief washed over me, tasting almost sweet in the back of my throat. My son was not the monster. He truly believed he was providing me with a life of comfort and absolute security. But that sweet relief was instantly slaughtered by the secondary ledger populating on the right side of the screen. Exactly 48 hours after the $9,000 landed in the trust, a programmed electronic sweep was triggered. It was an automated clearinghouse transfer, a silent digital ghost that required no human intervention. $8,850 was quietly, mercilessly extracted from the account. They left me exactly $150. I stared at that pathetic remainder, instantly recognizing the brilliant, exquisite cruelty of the math. $150 was just enough to keep the account categorized as active, preventing the bank's automated security system from mailing a zero-balance warning letter to Julian's corporate headquarters. It was a perfectly designed bleeding mechanism. "This is an automated diversion protocol," Marcus whispered, leaning closer to the screen, his breath briefly fogging the corner of the monitor. "They are bleeding you dry, Arthur. Where is it going?" "Pull the routing numbers." I stared at the glowing numbers, my voice dropping to a hollow, terrifying rasp. "Find the beneficiary institution." The banking network churned for an agonizing minute, communicating with external servers. The stolen funds were being funneled into a limited liability company registered in Delaware. The beneficiary name flashed across the screen in stark white letters. C. Vance Equity. Chloe Vance. She did not even bother to use a complex pseudonym or obscure the registration through offshore proxies. She was so entirely blinded by her arrogant assumption that I was a decaying, senile old man that she left her fingerprints all over the murder weapon. I instructed Marcus to dive deeper, to pull the physical asset holdings registered under C. Vance Equity through the public property tax databases. The screen refreshed, displaying a massive real estate holding. It was not a luxury assisted living condo in Boston. It was a sprawling, high-altitude ski chalet located in Aspen, Colorado. The monthly mortgage payment, combined with the exorbitant homeowner association fees and luxury property taxes, totaled exactly $8,850. Every single penny stolen from my survival was paying for a snowy paradise. Julian despised skiing. He had completely shattered his knee in a college accident and never stepped on a snowy slope again. Chloe did not ski either, but my mind instantly flashed back to the insufferable dinner where I first met Chloe's parents, Richard and Eleanor. I remembered them loudly complaining over expensive wine about the lack of suitable winter retreats for their social circle. I asked Marcus to run a secondary resident check on the Aspen address. The system confirmed it instantly. The registered secondary occupants were Richard and Eleanor. I sat back in the plush leather chair, the physical reality of the betrayal hitting my chest like a heavy sledgehammer. I could almost hear the clinking of expensive crystal champagne flutes in that sun-drenched Aspen living room. I could vividly see Eleanor wrapping herself in a plush fur blanket, laughing by a roaring, massive stone fireplace. They were warming their hands by a fire fueled entirely by my suffering. While I was wrapping my patched wool sweaters tighter to fight the damp Boston basement chill, rationing dented cans of soup, they were living like absolute royalty on the money meant to keep me alive. The metallic taste of betrayal coated my tongue, bitter and absolute. Marcus looked at me with genuine naked horror in his eyes. He reached for his desk phone, asking if I wanted him to freeze the account immediately and notify the federal authorities of elder financial abuse. I shook my head slowly. I reached out and took the freshly printed ledger from his hands. The crisp, warm printout paper felt incredibly heavy, loaded with a lethal, undeniable truth. Freezing the account would only warn the predator that the trap had been found, giving her time to destroy the remaining evidence. I folded the documents carefully and slid them into the breast pocket of my suit, right next to the crumpled pawnshop receipt. I thanked Marcus for his absolute discretion and walked back out into the brutal winter storm. I finally knew exactly where my money was going and who was stealing it. But the most devastating piece of this nightmare was still waiting for me in the dark. The transformation from a grieving father into a calculated hunter is not a loud event. It happens in absolute terrifying silence. Returning to my damp basement that evening, the icy puddle on the concrete floor and the relentless dripping of the rusted iron pipes no longer felt like a prison. They felt like a meticulously designed stage. I knew that the moment I began pulling banking records and checking property deeds, I was stirring the waters. A predator as paranoid as Chloe would inevitably feel the ripples. I did not have to wait long for her to make her move. Within 3 days, I noticed the shadow. A veteran investigator develops an involuntary sixth sense for surveillance. It was a nondescript, slate-gray sedan parked across the street from the neighborhood charity pantry. I caught the faint, metallic reflection of a telephoto lens resting on the driver's side window. Chloe had used my stolen survival funds to hire a private investigator. She had noticed my brief absences and panicked, terrified that my rotting brain was wandering into dangerous territory. I gave the man in the gray sedan an absolute masterpiece of a performance. When I walked out of the pantry carrying my dented cans of soup, I let my left foot drag heavily against the salted pavement. I kept my shoulders severely hunched, wrapping my patched wool sweater tightly around my fragile ribs. I paused at the corner, staring blankly at a stop sign for 2 full minutes with my mouth slightly open, perfectly mimicking the terrifying disorientation of advanced dementia. Let him take his high-resolution photographs. Let him deliver a glossy dossier to Chloe, proving that her father-in-law was nothing more than a helpless, decaying animal ready to be put down. The climax of her paranoia arrived on a freezing Thursday afternoon. The heavy wooden door of my basement did not merely open, it was shoved inward with aggressive force. Chloe stepped over the threshold, her designer leather boots clicking sharply against the warped concrete. The suffocating, expensive scent of her Santal 33 perfume instantly flooded the room, overpowering the familiar smell of damp mold. But she was not alone. Following closely behind her was a tall, excessively thin man wearing a poorly tailored gray suit that reeked faintly of cheap aftershave and stale cigarette smoke. He clutched a thick oxblood leather briefcase against his chest. He looked around my freezing basement with undisguised physical revulsion, his lip curling as a drop of condensation fell from the exposed pipes. Chloe did not bother with her usual sweet, condescending voice. The mask was entirely gone, revealing the cold, calculating reptile underneath. "Sit down, Arthur," she commanded, pointing a gloved finger at my small, wobbly kitchen table. She did not raise her voice. She simply expected total obedience. I shuffled toward the wooden chair, letting my hands tremble violently as I sat down. The man in the gray suit placed his heavy briefcase on the table, unlatched the brass locks with a loud double click, and pulled out a thick stack of legal documents. "My name is Elias," the man stated, his voice carrying the slick, practiced rhythm of a professional extortionist. "I am legal counsel representing your daughter-in-law. The document in front of you is a comprehensive medical and financial guardianship transfer. It grants Chloe absolute unilateral authority over your healthcare decisions and remaining assets." Chloe leaned over the table, placing her manicured hands flat on the scattered papers. She invaded my personal space, forcing me to look up into her pale, dead eyes. "You are becoming a massive liability, Arthur," she whispered, her breath ghosting over my face. "Wandering around the city, getting lost. Julian is terrified for you. You are going to sign this paperwork right now. If you refuse, Elias has a medical transport van waiting 3 blocks away. I will have you committed to the most violently underfunded state psychiatric ward in Massachusetts by sunset. You will be heavily sedated, strapped to a vinyl bed, and entirely forgotten. Julian will believe every single word I tell him." She had cornered me in my own home, using my son's love and my fear of institutionalization as a lethal weapon. It was a flawless, brutal checkmate against an old man. I let out a ragged, theatrical gasp. I looked at the papers, my eyes wide with manufactured terror. "Please, Chloe. I don't want to leave my home. I'll be good. Just let me read it." Elias let out an impatient, dismissive sigh, checking his silver wristwatch. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a heavy, gold-trimmed black fountain pen, slamming it onto the table in front of me. "Read fast, old man. We have a dinner reservation." I picked up the expensive fountain pen. The cold, heavy metal felt completely foreign in my trembling fingers. I pushed my reading glasses up my nose and looked down at the dense wall of legal jargon. To an untrained eye, it was an impenetrable fortress of legalese. To an investigator who had spent 40 years dismantling complex corporate contracts, it was a beautifully flawed puzzle. I scanned the paragraphs, searching for the mechanics of her trap. Elias was a lazy, arrogant attorney. He had clearly copied and pasted this document from a massive, boilerplate corporate trust template without bothering to edit the underlying fiduciary clauses. And there it was, buried deep on page 4, paragraph 7. The clause explicitly stated that the execution of this guardianship transfer, involving a primary beneficiary of a publicly traded corporate entity, automatically mandated a comprehensive forensic audit. It required the corporate board of directors to immediately freeze all linked assets and deploy internal accountants to establish a flawless financial baseline before the transfer of power could be legally recognized. My heart hammered a violent rhythm against my ribs, but my breathing remained perfectly shallow and erratic. Chloe and Elias thought they were handing me my own death warrant. They had absolutely no idea that they had just armed a massive financial bomb and placed the detonator directly into my shaking hands. By forcing me to sign this, she was legally ordering Julian's most ruthless corporate accountants to tear apart the architecture of Vance equity. I looked up at Chloe, letting a single pathetic tear pull in the corner of my eye. "If I sign this, you promise you won't lock me away?" Chloe smiled. It was a terrifying, victorious display of teeth. "I promise, Arthur. You can stay right here in your dark little basement." She was lying, of course, but her lie no longer mattered. I lowered my head in total defeat. I pressed the cold gold nib of the fountain pen to the crisp white paper. I signed my full legal name, deliberately making the cursive jagged and frail. The ink bled into the paper, sealing her fate. Elias snatched the document the second the pen lifted, stamping it with a heavy notary seal. He shoved the paperwork back into his briefcase and snapped the brass locks shut. They turned and walked out without another word. The heavy wooden door clicked shut, locking me inside the freezing silence. The very second their footsteps faded up the concrete stairwell, the violent trembling in my hands vanished entirely. I stood up, my spine straightening to its full, commanding height. I wiped the fake tear from my cheek. The trap was officially armed, and the digital alarms in Julian's corporate headquarters were about to start ringing. The shareholder summit was exactly 4 days away, and I was going to need a very specific ally to light the fuse. The corporate machine operates on cold, unfeeling logic. The moment Elias filed that signed guardianship document, he unwittingly triggered an irreversible protocol within Julian's massive biotech conglomerate. The corporate accounting division, governed by strict SEC compliance laws, recognized the transfer of fiduciary control over a primary family trust. The automated failsafe engaged instantly. A team of elite forensic accountants began ripping through the ledgers to establish the required financial baseline. They found the $850 automated sweeps. They traced Vance equity. They discovered the Aspen chalet. While Chloe was busy packing her designer gowns, entirely oblivious to the massive financial earthquake rumbling beneath her feet, I was finalizing my own infiltration. I did not need to scream or break into the venue. I needed the man who truly controlled the company's pulse, the chief financial officer. I had met David only once, years ago, but I knew his reputation. He was a ruthless numbers man who viewed corporate finances as a sacred religion. I used a public phone to bypass the switchboard and reach his direct, secure line. I did not ask for a favor. I gave him the routing numbers, the name of the shell company, and the Aspen property address. I heard the sharp, ragged intake of his breath as the brilliant CFO verified the devastating anomaly in real time. I told him I needed to be inside the upcoming shareholder summit to deliver the final physical report directly to my son. David, deeply disgusted by the embezzlement infecting his balance sheets, agreed instantly. The alliance was forged in cold, hard data. Saturday evening arrived with a bone-chilling frost. I stood in the dark, freezing service alley behind the historic Boston Harbor Hotel, wrapped in my heavy overcoat. I had spent the last of my emergency cash at a traditional tailor to ensure my armor was flawless. Beneath the coat, I wore a perfectly tailored, dark charcoal bespoke suit. It was the uniform of a senior investigator. At exactly 7:30, the heavy steel service door clicked open. David stepped out into the freezing alley, a thick, heavily sealed manila folder gripped tightly in his hands. He did not look at me with pity. He looked at me with the absolute respect one veteran professional affords another. He handed me the complete verified forensic audit. The physical weight of the undeniable truth felt incredible in my hands. He nodded silently and led me through the chaotic labyrinth of the catering corridors. We bypassed the paranoid, private security checkpoints using his master executive clearance. David pushed open the heavy oak doors at the very back of the grand ballroom, just a fraction of an inch, allowing me to slip inside unnoticed. The sheer opulence of the room hit me like a physical blow. Massive crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over hundreds of wealthy investors and industry elite. Waiters in white gloves circulated with silver trays of champagne. I stood perfectly still in the deep shadows near the back wall, scanning the crowd. There she was. Chloe was standing near the front stage, looking like royalty in a stunning, floor-length sapphire gown. She was laughing a melodic, artificial laugh, charming a group of venture capitalists. And right beside her, wearing an incredibly expensive tuxedo funded entirely by my starvation, was her father, Richard. They were drowning in stolen luxury, utterly convinced of their own invincibility. The ambient noise in the ballroom suddenly died down. A bright spotlight snapped on, illuminating the center of the main stage. The crowd erupted into applause as Julian walked up to the clear acrylic podium. My son looked brilliant, powerful, but the heavy, dark circles under his eyes betrayed a profound, internal exhaustion. He adjusted the microphone and smiled warmly at the sea of investors. He began his keynote speech, talking about the future of biotechnology and the importance of ethical legacy. Then, his voice softened, carrying a heavy, misplaced sorrow. None of this would be possible without the incredible sacrifices of my father, Julian said, his voice echoing powerfully through the massive speakers. Although a tragic illness prevents him from being here tonight, I dedicate this entire summit to his honor and his memory. Chloe placed a delicate hand over her heart, closing her eyes in a perfectly rehearsed display of tragic, supportive grief. A collective murmur of sympathy swept through the ballroom. The absolute hypocrisy of the moment made my blood run cold. She was using my supposed mental decay as a prop to elevate her social status. The time for shadows was over. I stepped out from the back wall. I squared my shoulders, raised my chin, and took my first deliberate step down the center aisle. The heavy, polished leather of my shoes struck the hardwood floor with a sharp, commanding rhythm. The wealthy investors standing near the back were the first to notice. They parted like a wave, yielding to a sudden, terrifying storm, not because they knew me, but because my posture radiated an absolute, undeniable authority. As I marched down the aisle, a confused, rippling whisper spread through the crowd. Glasses of champagne were lowered. Hundreds of heads turned. The entire ballroom's attention violently shifted away from the stage and locked onto the dark figure moving relentlessly toward the front. I kept my eyes fixed with laser precision on the podium. Julian was mid-sentence when his gaze finally scanned the center aisle. He froze entirely. The inspiring words died instantly in his throat. He gripped the edges of the acrylic podium so hard his knuckles turned white. He blinked rapidly, expecting to see the frail, broken old man who was supposedly locked away in a freezing basement. Instead, he was staring at a formidable veteran investigator wearing a flawless charcoal suit. The sudden, heavy silence from the stage made Chloe turn her head. The very second her eyes landed on my face, the beautiful, philanthropic smile melted right off her perfectly contoured features. All the color drained from her cheeks. Her hand trembled so violently that the expensive champagne spilled over the rim of her glass, splashing darkly onto her sapphire gown. The nightmare she thought she had legally buried had just walked through the front doors. I ignored her entirely. I bypassed the security guards, who hesitated under the sheer weight of my presence, and climbed the 4 carpeted steps to the main stage. The silence in the room was so absolute you could hear the rustle of expensive fabric. I stood directly beside my son. He whispered the word "Dad" in a fragile, broken breath. I offered him a slow, steady nod. I did not take the microphone. I did not yell. I simply raised my right hand and extended the heavy manila folder directly into his chest. Julian slowly took the dossier. He opened the metal clasp, and this bright spotlight illuminated the crisp, white pages of the forensic audit. He saw the automated sweeps. He saw Vance equity. He saw the property deed for the Aspen chalet. The brilliant analytical mind of a CEO processed the devastating math in seconds. He looked up from the folder, his face completely hollowed out by the absolute destruction of his marriage. Below the stage, panic finally broke Chloe's paralysis. She practically ran up the stairs, sobbing loudly, desperate to reclaim the narrative. She reached out to grab the folder, begging Julian to listen to her, claiming it was an investment strategy, a safety net for the family. Julian jerked his arm away, stepping back as if she were toxic. He looked down at the woman he loved and saw nothing but a ruthless, greedy predator. "My CFO prepared this audit." Julian's voice shook with a terrifying, cold fury, projecting clearly without the microphone. "You stole his money. You let him freeze." The entire ballroom of investors and media watched in stunned silence as the queen of high society was exposed. Cameras began to flash, capturing the agonizing destruction of her public image. Chloe turned her desperate, tear-filled eyes toward me, her chest heaving with primal hatred. She opened her mouth to hurl an insult, to reassert her dominance, but she had absolutely nothing left. I stood perfectly composed in my charcoal suit, looking down at her with a profound, terrifying peace. "You can steal my money, Chloe," I whispered, the words carrying the devastating weight of a final verdict. "But you do not touch Margaret's time." The echo of my whisper hung in the heavy, electrified air of the grand ballroom long after the flashing media cameras stopped their frantic clicking. The queen of high society did not leave with an ounce of grace. Julian did not yell, nor did he need to utter a single curse word. He simply raised a trembling hand, signaling the head of his private security detail. 2 massive men in tailored suits stepped forward, flanking Chloe on both sides. They firmly instructed her to walk toward the exit. She tried to resist for a brief, pathetic moment, her sapphire gown dragging heavily against the polished hardwood floor. The expensive fabric soaked up the spilled champagne, smelling sharply of fermented grapes and bitter, absolute ruin. She looked back frantically, searching the crowd for her father. But Richard had already slipped out the heavy oak side doors, terrified that his own stolen lifestyle was about to be publicly dismantled by the authorities. An hour later, the massive ballroom had completely emptied of its wealthy spectators. Julian and I sat alone in a sterile, brightly lit backstage dressing room. The young chief executive officer had discarded his expensive tuxedo jacket and loosened his silk tie. He sat hunched over a small, scratched vanity table, staring blankly at the thick manila folder that had just annihilated his marriage. He looked like a completely broken little boy. He wept openly, the harsh fluorescent lights casting deep, unforgiving shadows over his tear-streaked face. The room smelled of ozone and cheap hairspray, a sharp contrast to the elegant perfume that had just walked out of his life forever. "I will pack your things tonight, Dad," Julian choked out, his voice thick with a crushing, suffocating guilt. He reached across the table, gripping my forearm with a desperate, terrified strength. "You are moving into the penthouse with me. I will hire private chefs to cook whatever you want. I will get round-the-clock medical staff. You will never spend another second in that freezing basement. I am so incredibly sorry I was so blind." I looked down at his trembling hand. I felt the rough, expensive cotton fabric of his shirt against my skin. I gently but firmly pulled my arm away. I offered him a warm, incredibly steady smile. "No, Julian." I kept my voice low and calm. "I do not want your penthouse, and I certainly do not need a medical staff hovering over me. I need my independence." He looked up, completely devastated, assuming I was punishing him for his negligence. I patiently explained that a retired investigator needs a quiet space to breathe, free from the suffocating weight of extreme corporate wealth and the heavy ghost of his profound guilt. We agreed, sitting in that sterile room, to rebuild our relationship entirely from the ground up. There would be no more blind trust and no more unspoken assumptions. Just absolute, brutal truth. The legal fallout over the next 3 weeks was incredibly swift and absolutely merciless. Julian unleashed his entire corporate legal division on Chloe and her family. They moved with the cold, mechanical efficiency of a military strike. By Monday morning, federal injunctions had completely frozen every single asset tied to Vance equity. The sprawling ski chalet in Aspen was legally seized by the banks and immediately listed for liquidation. Richard and Eleanor were violently evicted from their snowy paradise, forced to pack their stolen luxury garments into cheap cardboard boxes and return to their mundane, quiet lives. Chloe faced severe federal charges for wire fraud, document forgery, and elder financial abuse. The ruthless divorce proceedings stripped her of her designer coats, her luxury vehicles, and the high society status she valued above her own soul. Every single stolen penny was meticulously tracked down, extracted from her shell accounts, and wired directly back into my secure family trust. When my funds were fully restored, I did not purchase a massive estate. I did not seek out a luxury senior living community filled with amenities I did not need. Instead, I bought a modest, single-story log cabin sitting on the quiet edge of a vast, mirror-like lake in upstate New York. It has a beautiful, wide stone fireplace, thick insulated windows, and a heavy oak door that keeps the winter winds completely outside where they belong. The air always smells deeply of fresh pine needles and damp earth. But the most important thing the corporate lawyers recovered was not the money. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in a small, padded evidence box. I sat in my favorite leather armchair, the wood-burning fire radiating a deep, comforting heat against my old bones, and opened the package. I reached inside and pulled out the 1920s rose gold pocket watch. I ran my thumb over the familiar, subtle dent near the top clasp. The cold metal quickly warmed against my skin. I turned it over, tracing the sweeping cursive engraving that Chloe had used as a cheap prop to impress her mother. For my Arthur, until time stops. My wife's time was finally back where it belonged. Julian visits me every single Sunday. He leaves the private jets, the ringing phones, and the corporate stress behind in the city. We sit on my wooden deck overlooking the dark, freezing lake water. We drink strong, bitter black coffee out of cheap ceramic mugs, and we talk about life, legacy, and the future. He asks for my advice on complex business matters, and he actually listens to my answers. He finally understands the true value of the man who raised him. Looking back at the damp basement and the freezing nights, the greatest lesson I learned is that true power never resides in loud threats, expensive perfume, or flashy displays of stolen wealth. True power lives in profound patience, quiet observation, and the unyielding dignity of knowing exactly who you are. Predators who are driven entirely by greed will always underestimate those who operate with quiet integrity. They mistake silence for weakness, and they mistake age for incompetence. When you demand respect and set unbreakable boundaries, you build a personal fortress that no amount of manipulation can ever breach. If you have ever had to quietly gather your strength to sever a toxic, manipulative presence from your own life, I want you to share your story in the comments below. How did you finally take your power back?